All right, today I'm sitting down with my good friend Chris Mills. Chris is a CPA and business owner here in Victoria, BC. He grew up around entrepreneurship. His dad built a company from scratch. His mom was an artist. So seeing people build things was normal for Chris. One thing I really appreciate about Chris, though, is this. He didn't chase the loud version of success. He made deliberate choices about how much risk to take, how hard to push, and what kind of life he actually wanted to build. We talk about developing real skills before taking big swings, about pushing too hard in your 20s. Chris literally worked himself into shingles at one point. And we also talk about learning that growth isn't worth it if it costs your health or your family. We also get into parenting, leadership, and thinking beyond first reactions. So actually slowing down long enough to consider consequences and hear other perspectives. It's not really a conversation about accounting. It's a conversation about building a stable and durable life. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. Maybe that's the real secret to wealth. You have a home barber to make you look beautiful every day, and then people they're like, oh, that guy needs to be rich.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying that your financial advice is to invest in a home barber?
In a home barber.
This is bulletproof.
I'm neither an economist, an accountant, nor wealthy, but heed my advice. As I do not have a home barber, and I am
and I'm poor.
Neither an economist, an accountant, or wealthy.
Therefore,
it must be the home barber.
Nice.
Okay. All right. So today I've got the honor of spending some good time with my good friend Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah, something I want to say about you. No matter how much time we spend apart, when we get together, it's very easy. And to me, that's always been a sign of good friendship. So I'm very grateful for that, having you in my life. I've noticed you're just very generous with your time when you have it and your words. So I know we all, as your friends, appreciate it. And you've got a curiosity that'll enable some of our friends who read and learn a lot to just download onto you and us. And it's great to have that curiosity in the world. And you got this funny sense of humor, which I noticed when doing the LinkedIn research to get a bit of your background and hear, just like everyone to hear this, when you were a customer service rep for the Custom House Currency Exchange. You defined your role as you gave me money, I gave you money of a different color.
That's true.
Yes,
That's true.
Yes, that's very accurate. And as resolution specialist at West Corporation in 2003 to 2004, if you lived in the United States and had an AT&T wireless cell phone and you wanted to call customer service and yell at someone, and then you asked for someone else to yell at, you just might have spoken to me.
Yep, it's true. There was a lot of unhappy people back then. They did not like their cell phone coverage.
They did not. I wonder if to this day they think back, hey, there was that guy that made me feel really good one day in 2003 when I yelled.
He gave me a $5 bill credit I'll never forget.
So those things, right? Keep your good friends close. You're curious. From my perspective, you're also quite intelligent because it takes intelligence to bring that humor into life. You seem to care very strongly for your family too, as one can tell from their relationship, your relationship with your parents and your brother.
Thank you. Those are some very kind words. I really appreciate them. Those are the things that I strive to bring to my life and to the people around me. I am very fortunate to have a good group of friends, and you're certainly a big part of that.
Thanks, buddy.
Thrilled to have you back on the island so we get to see you more often. And yeah, I'm very fortunate to have a really great, close family. I'm very fortunate, and just thank you very much. I appreciate those words, and I just really appreciate having you in my life, man.
And we'll do our best to pull you out of your British formality today.
It's funny you mentioned that right after the LinkedIn comments, because a lot of times my natural state is to have that British boredom, or not boredom, but formality. And I very quickly find myself getting bored of myself. And so I find that that's why that leads me to the quirky sense of humor after, is to try and snap myself out of that stiff upper lip type of environment. So yeah, that all goes together there.
Well, let's pull the Monty Python out of you today.
Good stuff.
Love to chat a bit about your background, your career, and also your love for family and those types of things.
Certainly.
So let's get started. I'd love to give people some background and context. Broad strokes, you were born in Victoria. Your parents were entrepreneurs.
Correct.
Your dad joined and operated Osborne Wood Stoves, which, if I recall, was one of the larger wood stove companies in Victoria at the time.
Yeah, there were, I'm not sure how many there were in Victoria at the time, but they started off real small, a welding machine, and going up and down the island selling wood stoves out of the back of a cube van. Brochures were hand-drawn back of the napkin, and my dad joined with that company when it was just getting started and ran it and operated it for a lot of years. It was the life that I knew growing up. I didn't know him doing anything else. He started in the bank, but I think before I was around, he was involved in that business, and I stuck with it until somewhere close to the year 2000 or so, when eventually the business was not doing as well, but he was able to sell a little bit of it, and I was able to retire after that. That was his path, and now he's fully retired. My mom was an artist my whole life and traveled throughout Canada, going to craft fairs and Christmas shows to sell her art, and she's fortunate enough to be retired now too. Now their difficult days are generally spent on the golf course.
And something important to note too is not only were they successful in their careers and what they were pushing forward on, but they managed to stay together. And I've met your parents a number of times. They're very strong. Now, you can never tell what's happening in the background, but they're still together. They raised you and your brother. You guys have great values and great desire to push forward in what you're up to. So it's a testament to how they worked and helped you guys grow.
Yeah, they just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary recently.
Wow.
And not even being that old myself, I can only imagine the ups and downs that come with 50 years of marriage. But whatever they were, they've been together. They've not just stuck together, they've worked together. They spend a lot of time together. They golf together. They've got friends together. They truly live a life together. And it's a fantastic example that they've set. And I'm really happy for them.
They're lovely. Your parents are great. I remember when we were younger, and I'd be like, oh, go see Chris's parents. They're the cool ones that let us have a nice time in their house.
They would actively encourage me having my friends over for a party. They knew they had to turn a blind eye to a couple of things that might have been going on at that party, but they appreciated that we had friends, that we wanted to have a good time together, healthy friendships. That's what they're all about, and certainly wanted to encourage that. And so lots of my friends wanted to come to my house. And in grade 12, I was voted best party giver. And I remember my best friend at the time, Sam, looking at me and saying, "You didn't win this award. Your mom did."
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. And it's true.
Did you bring it home to her?
You deserve this.
Could be here without my mom.
It's true. It's true.
It's true. How about you paint the picture, fill us in a little of the details. You finished high school in 90.
Yeah, I graduated in 99, started with a year at UVic. Thought I'd start in sciences, so I did that. Within a few months, decided that wasn't going to be my future. Thought I was going to go business, didn't know what I was going to do, so I did a semester of that. At the end of first year, pretty much all the friends that I had in Victoria were about to exit. And everybody, they were going to different places, whether it was school or work. And so I didn't want to be left behind, so some friends were living in Edmonton. I decided to move there. Had these grand plans of learning how to build houses and flip houses. And my friends were doing construction, but I didn't end up joining for that part. Ultimately spent the first couple of months just reading a lot of books and exploring my ideas of the world, and then ran out of money and got a job that was not very enjoyable. It was like a pharmacy warehouse, working from 8 p.m. till 4:30 in the morning, filling boxes of inventory, walking around in circles around the floor of the warehouse. Anyway, long story short, I was looking for another opportunity, saw this newspaper ad to teach English and travel. And I'd heard of people doing that, going and teaching English in other countries, and it immediately spoke to me. I'd always wanted to go to South America and explore some of the historical sites there. And so I took that course. You know, it was good because it was a full weekend long. So really,
Wow.
really top quality.
Were they full days?
You know what? I'm understating it. It was 2 full days and 3 evenings. So,
Okay, that's the advanced part.
yeah,
right
yeah. I
there.
got the full certificate
Yes,
because of the
absolutely.
3 evenings. And then within 2 months, I was on a plane to Peru. And that began my backpacking journey of spending a lot of time in South America, and spent some time traveling, spent some time teaching, and came back. And I think that's about the time that I met you, because I went down there maybe 2000 or 2001. I know I was 19 when I went down, so that, and turned 20 when I was down there. So I think it was when I was back from those travels that would have been when we first started crossing paths. And then into university to resume that. No, wait, there was a year in Japan before that. I forgot about that.
Well, yeah.
Teaching English and trying to make a little bit of money to repay my folks who'd helped me finish off my travels in South America. So did a year in Japan, and then by the end of the year in Japan, I was ready to start my, I don't want to say start my life because I was enjoying a pretty good life before that, but start the responsible side of my life, I guess. And then 3 years of university, going through business school, and then through business school decided that a Bachelor of Commerce degree was probably not going to be a golden ticket to anything particular. Good skills, but doesn't immediately translate something to, say, your degree in engineering, where you've got very tangible skills at that point. And I remember a lot of the accounting firms coming around the school and talking about how right after school you can have a job, they're paying for your education, and so it was this opportunity to, rather than paying a university for the opportunity of a master's degree, it was to let a company pay me to work and pay for my education and come out of that with a ticket. And at that time, I thought that I was going to follow in my parents' footsteps of being an entrepreneur, but I wanted the accounting designation to fall back on, because not that my folks had incredible hardships along the way, but I knew that going into business as an entrepreneur, there's a big risk there. And I didn't want to take a risk or be in a position of risk where it was an all or nothing. I wanted something I could always fall back on if it didn't work out. And so the ticket was really important to me. But as they do, things changed, and I never ended up going down the entrepreneur path of starting a business from scratch, like a manufacturing business like my dad did. But I stuck with the firm, and it's gone through different iterations, but eventually became a business owner within the firm, an entrepreneur in that sense, but not in the sense of a startup and really building something ground up.
That's so interesting, right? Because there's that entrepreneur label. People look at the ones that start something from scratch versus work their way into owning a business or being part of a business. And there's almost like a glory in one and this quiet, I don't know exactly what the word is, but quietness of the other.
Well, I think there's a reason to have two different ideas, and there's a very different mentality of the two. One is the starting from scratch, the really building something. And you can really build even if you didn't go from scratch. If I had that spirit and drive within the firm I have now, I could be looking at major growth. I could be looking at acquiring other firms, opening up new offices, taking on new business lines, and really, really grow it and drive it and build it. And at one point in my life, I think I had that enthusiasm, but that becomes a pretty all-encompassing way to spend your life if you have that drive. And if you have the opportunity to just focus on that, that can be a great outlet. But I certainly know at this point in my life, it would come at the sacrifice of family time, friend time, exercise time, health time. And for me, I would not be successful in being able to quell that fire and that desire to build it in something and make sure that it was done successfully. So I have to set that little fire aside and do it the other way.
Well, yeah, that's it. There's this pernicious idea that everyone has to have a work-life balance. And they can, which is what some of us are doing, what you're doing. But then there's that little group of crazy people that they sacrifice everything to build the thing that they're obsessed with, that idea that they're working on.
Yep.
Those people fascinate me. I don't think I could be there either. I value so many other things in my life similar to you, friends, family, health, mental health as well, all those things.
I think some people are like that their whole lives. I think a lot of people have the opportunity, say maybe in your 20s, to have that, or you have the energy to do that for 14 hours a day and then still go see your friends and get 3 hours of sleep and feel okay the next day. That's just not physically possible for me anymore. But also where your personal family connections aren't as strong. You're a lot less likely to have a kid that needs your attention, and you're a lot less likely to have a spouse who needs your help because you've got kids at that time. And so you just have more hours available in the day. But I think it's common that as you get older, the fewer and fewer hours available to really focus without sacrificing in a big way.
So growing up when you were in university, thinking about entrepreneurship, doing your business degree, were you having those conversations with your mom and dad about what does entrepreneurship look like? And this is the direction I want to go. Were they supportive? How involved were they?
That I would be smart enough to draw on the available resources of my parents and their experience. I was terrible at asking questions. This isn't quite what you were asking about, but it's another example. I remember being in university and having a conflict with needing a certain number of courses by a certain period of time. And I would just make assumptions about what the rules were, what the situation was, and have to adapt. And it just never occurred to me to go to the university and say, hey, this is my situation. What can I do about it? I just it just didn't even cross my mind to ask questions. And I think certainly in my early 20s, I was probably a little bit too, not arrogant, but not quite full of myself, but just at the same time thinking I had all the answers. And so what would anybody else tell me? And if I received advice, I would just probably think to myself, oh, okay, that's nice. And then just continue on the same path that I was on. So no, I didn't ask their questions. They certainly would have been supportive of me. They've always been incredibly supportive. But I didn't have an idea for the entrepreneurship at that time. I think if I'd actually had an idea of what my business was going to be at that point, and I'm sure I would have told them and they would have given their feedback even if I hadn't directly asked for it. But I didn't call on their experience enough.
Well, that's something you're touching on is the art of asking questions, but also this, we assume that just by being around our parents that we're absorbing everything, and we do to some extent. I have a friend, and him and his wife purposefully have been teaching their kids about business from when they were kids with little flower stalls to now when they're teenagers, they're teaching them about investing and finance and that type of thing. How, thinking about all that, what's the question? Thinking about what you just said about when you were young, you knew everything. How does one today, and you being a parent now, teach your kids or teach kids in general without being too overbearing or forcing them into a path that they rebel against? How do you balance teaching, but also giving them a little more so that they take it in and it carves their path out?
Well, my kids are 5 and 7 right now, so I would say I'm at the very early stages of that. At this time, we're at the stage of just trying to expose them. I know society talks a lot about kids doing too many activities, and I'll tell you from my own experience that a lot of the temptation for that is wanting them to experience everything. I want them to experience ice skating. I want them to experience riding the bike. I want them to experience horseback riding and swimming and art and music and sports. I want them to experience all of it because I would love for them to find some passions in there somewhere. And once they are exposed to something and they really like it, I'd love to foster that passion. And so for me, that's the stage where I'm at, and that's what I think is really important, is to help them find their own passion. Now, I don't believe in kids of my kids' age doing activities 5 nights a week, so we really limit them. We want them doing swimming because that's a life skill, and we try to limit it to just one more activity in any particular week because we think downtime and family time is really important. So we're careful about that, but at the same time trying really hard to help them find something that they love and they can latch on to and that they can be focused on, because I think self-motivation is the most important part that leads to your second question about not being overbearing. My oldest, for example, she was excited to try baseball. And so we signed her up for baseball. She's seen me watch it a lot, so I think she had that connection to it. And I was there every practice and eventually was one of the coaches on the team, and she liked it. And she really enjoyed it to start. The second year we did it, you could tell that the interest just really wasn't there anymore. The days that she liked the most were when the other kids' sisters came to the practice and they were on the side having fun, and you could tell that's where she wanted to be. But I knew she liked it too, but just not the organized structure of it. And so I had to let that go. I had to understand, okay, this is not a passion that you have. Great that you tried it, and it was fun to do together, and let's try the next thing. I think helping them find their passion is the first part. And then you don't have to feel like you're forcing them into something, because it becomes theirs. The other one that's going to be, I'm sure, a challenge for me, and particularly later in life, and I'm going to really have to draw on my parents' experience here, is that they let me make my own mistakes. They were there to guide, and they were there to give a stern look, or worse, when I was misbehaving. But by and large, they let me make my own mistakes. And their suggestions were generally subtle. And if they had been more than subtle, I probably would have rebelled harder. And as a parent and as somebody who's generally in control of many areas of my life, I'm a business owner, I get to have a lot of autonomy. It's going to be hard to release that level of control once they're at an age where they should be making their own decisions and should be suffering the consequences of their mistakes and celebrating the rewards of their achievements. So it's tempting to try to force them into academic success, force them into a path that will be what I think leads them to a good life. But again, that's just an area where I'm fortunate to have had the experience of my parents letting me fail hard, and still coming back and being able to succeed. That's going to be my challenge once they're at that age where they start making mistakes that have real consequences, not just the mistakes that a 7-year-old makes.
Do you remember a defining time or moment where you switched on and said, I'm going to start asking my parents for advice and help and questioning?
I would have to say that I'm probably still not very good at it. I'm in a very fortunate stage of my life where I don't need a lot of advice at this point. Things are in a good place, in a solid place. But in general, I've not asked them very often for advice. Not to say never. I often will communicate what's going on and tell them what's going on, and we'll talk about it, but I seldom think to myself, I really need their advice. I certainly call on my dad, for example, for help with investing advice and things like that, but the real life stuff, I don't do a very good job of asking for advice. And I don't know why. It's something that I don't even think to do. It's not like I just think about it and then decide, no, I don't want their advice or something. I just forget to ask, or don't even think that I should ask.
Even without that, they played a big part in your life in giving you the rules and the help and the permission, as you said, to fail and still be there to catch if needed on the other side.
Yep, they were always there for me. They set the example. They might not have told me how to do it, but they certainly showed me how to do it. And I don't necessarily do everything the way that they do, but certainly within the arena of how they have lived their lives is a beacon, or the way that I try and live mine and come back to when I'm feeling lost.
Other than your parents, was there anyone else that inspired you, or was that beacon for you growing up?
I think the strongest influences, just those that are close to me. My parents have probably been the biggest influence, even if it's not in the way of seeking advice or treating them like mentors. I've had the good fortune of having some very good friends in my life, friends that I've had since 12 years old that are still a part of my life, even though they have lived in different countries throughout the years and still live in different countries. They're still the people that, like you described before, no matter how long it's been, you can just show up at their house and it's right back to where it was before. And that kind of stability and consistency and deep enough connection to have that. That's been my guiding inspiration, is trying to have that in my life. And then the other ones that I notice the most are the people who are very different from me. And the two examples that jump to mind, one is our good friend Joe. And for him, he's grown up just with a very different mentality in terms of whether it's politics, finances, etc. And he's incredibly well researched and knowledgeable. And so, but he's very often coming from things from a different perspective. And so there are so many times where I've had lunch with Joe and come away from it feeling like I've learned something and like I've seen the perspective of the other side. And so that's one really big example. The other is my business partner, and he's an accountant, but he's a social guy first. He's got 100 friends, and he is definitely emblematic of working to live, not working to.
It's like a means to an end.
Yeah.
Really. Work is a means. My grandma used to say that.
Yeah. And that's good, because I've had a tendency to take things too seriously sometimes. Want it to be perfect, need everybody to be happy, need every client to be happy, need to answer every email within an hour, customer service first. And he manages to balance that. Some emails don't get answered right away, but he's living a great life with a great family, has a lot of fun, and that's a good balance. I don't ever expect to be him. I'm never going to be somebody with 100 friends. That's not what I even aspire to have. But I think it's great to have that balance and have at least somebody else that can have that balance in your life to remind you that it's not all about how you perceive the world, that there are a lot of different ways to live this life successfully and happily.
Both those examples you're bringing in it's having different perspectives, not necessarily aligned with how you see the world. And that seems to be, especially this day and age, people have this echo chamber of their perspective. And how would we go about maintaining these other perspectives? Because it really is, sometimes you hear this thing that just decimates your worldview, and you're so attached to that worldview because it's a piece of yourself. How can we do that, not only for ourselves, but for your kids, for example, to have that spark of, hey, it's okay to have friends that don't have your point of view, and it's actually healthy?
Well, I think, to me, the first part, and this is what you talk about in this day and age, the scariest part to me about that right now is the idea that the other side is wrong. And there's just so much divide, and not just that I think differently from you, but that I think differently from you, and the way you think is a plague on this world. It's evil, it's
wrong.
Immoral, it's dangerous. And media in particular is under threat. Journalists for years have prided themselves on neutrality and not being part of a story. Many journalists won't even vote in an election because they feel it impairs their impartiality. And that's very quickly changing. Not necessarily all journalists. There are many that still follow those principles, but there are many more in journalism who are entertainers principally and marketers principally. I would love to see a news source that in most articles that were affected by opinions to express both sides and not just be neutral, but to say, hey, people who tend to think this way could perceive this to be this way. People who see this event through this lens are likely to interpret the events this way. Helping you understand why somebody thinks differently, how they perceive it differently. I think that's part of it, is accepting that the other side, the other viewpoint is fair, is valid, comes from a reasonable place. And I think both sides think the other side is brainwashed and foolish and that they've had the wool pulled over their eyes. I hear comments all the time, oh, you've been listening to too much Fox News. People listening to Fox News, oh, you've been listening to too much CNN. Everybody thinks the other side's getting duped, that they're not smart enough to see the full picture or the real picture.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, the underlying dangerous assumption.
How are you balancing that for your kids? to have them have that open mind and not judge too quickly?
Well, they're still quite young, so nuance and subjective thinking, we're only at the very beginning stages of that. But my wife and I like to talk about ideas. We're not afraid to talk about politics in front of our kids. It's not a big conversation topic for us. It's not our favorite thing to talk about, but it's still part of the world we listen to or that we're part of. We do talk about it, and my oldest in particular is getting to an age where she's hearing more and more things and starting to comment. And so my biggest thing is trying to instill the idea that we don't know everything about the situation, that there's often more to a situation than just what you see on the surface. As a random example right now, with all of the international issues that Canada and the US are experiencing right now, there's a massive buy Canadian movement right now. And I think that's great in principle, but I think a lot of the time we have to understand really what the consequences of our actions are. If we refuse to do anything that's at all associated with an American company, how many Canadians are we going to sacrifice to spite that American company that we don't want to support right now? How many Canadian landlords are going to have vacancies because those stores are empty? How many employees are going to be without a job because we don't support that company? I'm not advocating against support Canadian. I'm just the idea that we need to think fully about the consequences of our actions, think fully about the consequences of our opinions, and trying hard to understand what those other opinions are. And just ask questions, seek the deeper explanation, and avoid the temptation to give in to, say, sloganism of politics and black and white answers of what's right and wrong. That's what I hope to instill in the kids.
Well, you're touching on those second and third and fourth order impacts of a choice, of a decision. You go this way, this is your immediate consequence. But human beings, we're just awful at thinking, okay, and then what? And then what from that, right? I've often wondered, do we teach thinking well enough for kids as well these days? I don't know. I don't have kids, so I don't know what they're teaching in school programs, but that ability to think not only as you're touching on, but of a different perspective, but also the impact of choices and how there's more to it.
A really good, interesting, kind of fun read, but also mentally provocative read. I don't recall what the person's role was, but there's a show called The Good Place, and it's rooted in philosophy ideas, and either the producer or director, somebody associated with the show, wrote a book, and the book has a lot of those mental exercises. And one of them, for example, a silly example, but you go grocery shopping and you've got your cart. Do you return the cart to the cart bin where it's supposed to go, or do you just leave it there? When the first idea is, oh, well, you're a bad person if you don't return it to the cart bin. But if you do return it to the cart bin, did you just cost somebody their job? Because now there's nobody that has to go get that cart for you and put it back. So it's just, obviously that's kind of a silly example, but it's relevant to so many other decisions of, the real consequences of your actions. And it's a fun and interesting book, but it's just pretty relevant to that idea.
Yeah, interesting. I've never heard of it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so we kind of touched on thinking people even. So pulling it back to your firm, you joined the firm pretty soon after school, and with time and some hard work, you became a partner and / owner. What was that journey like? And what was the thinking and the decision path that made you want to go that way?
I can't say it was a grand plan from the beginning. Technically, I actually started at the firm before I was finished university. I was starting to look for a firm to do my articling at, and spoke with them, and the university had a co-op type program, so convinced them to hire me for their tax season and take me on as a co-op student. So I did a few months and before finishing off my last semester. And then when I was done school, I started the articling with them pretty much right after. And the way the timing works, you're pretty much in school weeks after you've finished university. You start the program and you're right into it. That said, I took a little bit of a slower path. I didn't do it quite as fast as I could have. There's a number of modules you have to take leading up to the exam, and I slowed it down a little bit. just because I had lots of other stuff going on. But for those first few years, you're really just working and schooling, and everything's all leading up to that big final exam and trying to get your months and your hours in all your different areas and really just pursuing that ticket. And the exam's a once a year pass or fail type thing. And so it's this big kind of pressure cooker because you're learning at work, you're taking on bigger files every time, you're trying to take on bigger roles. You start as just the little junior that's just checking invoices and making sure things right and just check. And eventually you start trying to learn how to apply the principles to the work you're doing and start trying to think about how to do the work. And so those first few years are just full on, just focused on trying to learn, get experience, how you put the files together, how you do the work, how you get through the program, tests at the end of every module, and leading up to that big final exam that's 3 days long, and again, pass or fail. And if you fail, you've got to wait till the next year to have another shot at it. Yeah, it's a tough exam, but you're focused on that for a few years. Once I completed that program, then the next thing is, where do you go now with your career? So a lot of people that go through that decide that they don't even want to work in public practice anymore. They want to go to industry. They want to go to government. Well, the whole idea of having that ticket is that it opens you up to those opportunities. So at that time, I decided that working in tax was what interested me. And so I then took the 2-year in-depth tax course that the Institute offers. And so just really trying to focus on still building the skills, building the knowledge, building the experience. And so I spent 2 years obviously continuing to work and grow that side of my experience, but then also doing that program on the side to just really beef up my skills and my knowledge. And so did that for a couple of years. Now in between there, right when I finished my CA designation, within months, the firm I was working for split into 2 firms. One of the partners needed to retire, and the remaining partners had, let's just call it, philosophical differences. And so they decided that was the impetus to go different directions. And oddly enough, the way that the firm split was actually quite literal. We were on 2 floors in the same building with a staircase. And when the firm split, they demolished the staircase, sealed it up, and said, "You stay down, we'll stay up."
Was there another way to get out of those floors?
There were exterior doors.
All right.
But no more interior doors. But that was my business partner, who was one of the ones who split. He might call it a blessing in disguise now. It was quite a bit of turmoil for him. But for me, it was the absolute greatest thing that could have possibly happened. Because at that stage in the firm, there were a couple of people that were of my age, but a year or 2 ahead of me in terms of completing the program, and they went with the other firm. And so I very quickly became number 2 in the firm that I was in. It just cleared out the path ahead of me, and I was just experienced enough to handle a number 2 role. And I had enough other skill sets that would allow me to do that. I'm not an IT expert, but I know enough to keep the basics going, so that was helpful. And yeah, it was the greatest thing that could have happened in my career, as it just launched me right into number 2.
So it's that old hard work, experience, expertise, and luck.
And a huge amount of luck. I often hear that expression, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And I certainly believe that there's a little bit to it. If I hadn't worked hard, I wouldn't have been given the opportunity to be the number 2 at that point. But nothing about my hard work created a firm split. That had nothing to do with me. So huge amounts of luck. And I've had lots of luck in my life, but that was certainly one of the biggest in terms of my career. So now we're in a smaller firm. I'm a number 2. I take the in-depth tax course so that I can be the tax focus of the office, do that for a couple of years. And then at that point, I kind of realized this public practice is what makes sense for me. I like this balance of life. Yeah, we had busy tax seasons, but generally the rest of the year, pretty manageable, lots of downtime in the summer, and so it was a good fit. And so I eventually started pressuring my partner at the time to let me buy in, let me be with you to do this and grow it, and he was happy to do so. So that was the progression to being able to come in as a partner, and we've grown the firm, but growth has not been our focus. It's not been our drive. We don't do advertising. We're not out there begging for Google reviews or trying to generate news articles or any of the other ways you might grow the firm. We let it grow naturally, let it become what it becomes, and it has grown, but at a manageable pace, and we've enjoyed it.
So now you're a partner, a leader of people, really. Are there any ways of being or mantras, philosophies that you use in your day-to-day leadership or management thinking?
I think the main one for me is trying to make it a place that people enjoy coming to work, trying to make sure that we're not pushing people into a level of work pressure that puts stress on their lives and puts stress on their family situations. I think a lot of professionals like engineers, lawyers, accountants, I think that for a long period of time, we were all known for working excessive numbers of hours, and if you left at 5 o'clock, it was an indication that you were not committed to the team, and just really expecting a lot out of people and expecting them to push hard and prove themselves. And anyway, I think in general that philosophy has toned down in our society, and I think that's great. But I certainly try and have that for our staff too. It's something that I work really hard to have that kind of balance in my life, and so I want it to be a place that people want to come to. In today's world, it's hard to find staff who are good quality staff, and when you've got them, you've got to do what you can to keep them engaged, keep them, if they're at the stage where they're growing their career, to show them that there is a way to grow their career, grow their experience. So not just get the CA program, but then there's an opportunity for them to do the in-depth tax specialization, for example, or focus on audit if that's what they want to do. Because if you're a person who's gone through school, decided to go through university, decided to go through the program, you clearly have some level of drive and desire to learn and achieve things, and that doesn't stop just because you're now 26 with your CPA ticket. There's more growth and development to happen from there. So it's wanting to foster that.
What are some strategies or even tactics you use to foster that, to mentor those younger accountants?
I think the main one is trying to check in on a regular basis and see where they're at, where they want to take their career, and just encouraging them that that's valuable to the firm as well, and trying to help them in that pursuit and find out what their goals are and help chart a path to that happening. And not doing it aggressively. Again, not trying to say, well, if you work 1,000 hours of overtime, then you just might get it. It's got to be something that's an enjoyable achievement, not forcing them to sacrifice everything for the achievement.
Do you find, or do you think that maybe how we've toned down our society and brought in that work-life balance a little more, is that setting us at a competitive disadvantage on the world stage?
I'm sure it is. I think it's why we always say that empires eventually fall. I think the natural occurrence is to get soft. If you're cold and you're hungry and you're destitute, you are going to work your tail off to get to a place where you feel safe, where you feel fed, where you are warm, and you will work your tail off. You'll fight if you need to, and eventually you'll have that, and you'll have the comforts, and then you won't want to work as hard, and that's natural. So yes, I think that letting everybody not do tons of overtime and say, okay, it's 40 hours. And then we say, well, 40 hours is still a lot. You need your nap, so how about 35 or 38 or Fridays off? And then you say, oh, is 4 days a week? That's still a little too much. You don't quite have enough time for your friends and your hobbies. Okay, well, how about 3 days? Eventually, we're not producing.
Yeah.
And if we lived in a world where everybody had the luxury to do the 3 days a week or the 4 days a week, and
You mean on a global level?
on a global level where we all had enough water, we all had enough food, and I'm not saying everything equal, but we all had enough, then I think it could be successful. But we don't live in a world where everybody has enough. We live in a world that most people don't have enough. And not to go too far down a tangent, but the people that do have enough are often living off the exploitiveness of those who don't. So I think eventually the people that have will lose that drive and lose the appetite to fight for what they have. And the people that need it will work harder, and they will fight for it, and they will take it aggressively. I think that's why empires fall. I do think it'll set up exactly what you're talking about, but I don't know how it's avoidable. We work when there's a carrot in front of us. What do you do when you have enough carrots? I don't think it's until you're faced with something like somebody trying to, sorry for beating the analogy to death, steal your carrots, that all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I need to work harder to build a fence, or I need to do more things to protect this, to build it. And until you have to, there's not enough motivation to keep doing it.
Yeah. Let me tell you, I worked very hard when I was 17, living in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 to 3 other people.
Yeah.
Trying to get enough money to eat. Those were rough days.
Why do you think Conor McGregor only does exhibition matches now? Yeah. He's got his money. He doesn't need to get pummeled in the face anymore to achieve his goals. He achieved them. Now he gets to enjoy it. But somebody's coming up the ranks and is willing to fight for it and do everything tooth and nail to get it. And I don't think you can fight that drive with just a desire to keep what you've got.
No, you're probably right. I was having a conversation on a similar topic with a coworker. They were touching on how our friends south of the border just work that much harder than us up here. And we couldn't put a reason as to why, but there's a cultural impetus for a lot of Americans versus Canadians just to work that much harder, go put in that many more hours, drive that much further every day to get to the job site or back, and sacrifice so much more.
I'm sure there are reasons. I think a lot of there's just a different baseline. I mean, we expect a bare minimum of 2 weeks vacation plus almost a stat holiday every month. And their baseline is not having necessarily 2 weeks of vacation, and their number of stat holidays, most of them aren't real stat holidays. You get Thanksgiving and Christmas and maybe a couple others, and some industries get some more. And certainly if you're more experienced and higher up in the corporate world, you're going to get some vacation time. But there are a lot of places where it's not, and so getting a week off is a massive luxury, whereas for us, it's a given. And we compare ourselves to the States and see that productivity. But what I'm more interested in is you look to Europe, and our vacation entitlement seems meager compared to vacation entitlement in a lot of the Scandinavian countries. And our adoption of 4-day weeks is at a snail's pace compared to theirs. Unfortunately, our closest trading partner and the ones we use the measuring stick against are the ones working more than us. But we're not necessarily the ones working the least. Not to say that in a bad way for the other countries. I think that's something to aspire to. I love that they have policies that force the dad in a relationship to take some paternity time off when he has a kid. Not forces it, but it's a take it or lose it. Here in Canada, the dad can use some of the time. In some of the Scandinavian countries, if the dad doesn't use it, the mom does not get more. So it just really encourages it, and it makes it a cultural thing to support family values and family togetherness and work life. I think it's fantastic. I don't know if it was Sweden or Norway or perhaps all of them, they're like-minded, but yeah, it was something I saw and I thought it was a great approach to it. And they don't seem to be crumbling empires going in reverse, but and there's a philosophical difference about the good of the community versus the good of the whole. Capitalism is, in general, a selfish pursuit. And I think the capitalists will tell you that what's good for some is good for all of society, and that growth benefits all, but it certainly benefits some more than others. And maybe there is more wealth overall in a capitalist society and more or quicker technological development and progress, but you got to ask yourself, at what expense? Is it that important that we get that technology today instead of tomorrow? When it comes to medical technology, I would love that to be as fast as humanly possible. I don't particularly feel the need for my phone to have an infinitely better camera as soon as possible. I think there's obviously huge benefits to technology in today's world, but how important is it to get the luxuries that we enjoy in our life, the developing technology. Yeah, it all comes with a cost.
Pulling it back from the world stage more to the accounting world, what does that world look like now versus 20 years ago? Are things evolving? How are they evolving? People talk a lot about technology, AI, tools, automation. How are you seeing that impact the industry, the workforce?
I wouldn't call anything a seismic shift. Certainly when I started, files were done on paper. When we did auditing and we were checking invoices, I was using giant green ledger paper and manually writing out invoices. And I would sometimes hand a file in and the file would be that thick or bigger for some bigger files. And I'm sure at that time the bigger firms were more automated than we were. And over time, our files became less and less paper-based and more software-based. And it really just shifted the work. We were still doing the same work, but just doing it in a different manner. And certainly some efficiencies there as you use technology for the work, but again, not seismic shifts, but adjustments. And the more recent impetus for change was COVID. So in the very beginning, certainly all of a sudden everybody's working from home. And we were very fortunate at that time that we were pretty paperless and we could still accomplish our work through doing it electronically and remoting in. And it certainly fostered a quicker adoption of those technologies for maybe parts of the work that we did that were not yet doing that for. That triggered change. I know in a lot of firms and companies, work from home became a really big thing and a really big desire of staff. And we didn't actually experience that. In fact, most of our staff were eager to get back into the office. That surprised me in some ways, partly because us accountants tend to be introverts and loners and like our quiet time, but maybe we're so good at that coming to the office once in a while is our social outlet. But, especially for the people that have a bit of a commute, I thought there'd be a little more pressure to try and do that. And quite honestly, I'm glad that it hasn't, because I think in a place where skill development and experience growth and gains are such a big part of the career path, you need to be around other people. I felt sorriest for the most junior people, like the co-op students we had when COVID hit, because they weren't getting the mentorship and the feedback. Normally they would put together a file. In normal circumstances, a manager will review that file, teach them what they did wrong, and give it back to them to make those corrections to really instill that lesson, and then they hand it back, and they probably made mistakes again, so it sends back to them, and they keep doing it until they get it right. And at that time in the world where we're all working weird hours because we're trying to balance family and COVID, we're trying to balance our own lives, managers might be reviewing a file at 9 o'clock at night, and you can't just immediately go to the person who prepared the file and go over it with them when it's fresh. And trying to do it over Zoom is a huge hassle. And so a lot of the time it's just, I'm just going to fix this and move on. And so the skills that I developed from having my work gone over with a fine-tooth comb over and over again, I fear that the juniors today are not getting that. And I think that makes it tough to get jobs as a junior, but everybody's got to start somewhere. I don't know what the end game is there, but I fear a cycle that's unsustainable of only looking for experienced people, not wanting to hire juniors and give that feedback because it's inefficient, but it's a necessity. And at some point it'll really become a necessity because the experienced people will have retired. They'll be out. But I fear we're creating a gap that one day is going to need to be reckoned with.
Yeah. That doesn't even include the new tools that are out there, killing some of that work for the juniors to thrive on and to learn from.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, is that technology, those are the jobs that get attacked first. When I was starting out, and let's say personal tax returns, I would get a stack of papers and I would have to manually enter in every single box on every single investment slip or employment slip, and I would manually enter that all into the software. And now we can just hit a button and it all downloads from the government agency and auto-populates our software. Whereas for me, that might have been an hour of work. For a junior today, it's 5 minutes of work. And it means for a senior, it's also 5 minutes of work. Well, thinking of it from a business owner's perspective, I can afford to pay an expensive manager 5 minutes to do a little bit of legwork on a file. I can't afford to pay them to do an hour of legwork on a file. It reduces my needs for the juniors, and it reduces their opportunities to do that work. And I don't know if the result is going to be needing to have it as more of the education process so that they're coming out of the educational institutes more ready to launch into a middle level role. But at the same time, there's just no substitute for experience. You can learn all the theory you want, but until you're actually applying that knowledge, you're still green. So somehow we're going to have to come up with that bridge.
So there's that one example. It's probably similar to when I do my taxes. Push the button, downloads all the T4 information right into my U-File account.
Exactly.
Auto-populated. Are there other examples of work that's being streamlined that the juniors are losing access to?
Certainly. A major area is in audit. Again, when I was going through, and I mean, we were probably behind the times on the bigger firms that were sooner to adopt technology, but when we would audit an organization, we would go to their offices, we would look at their books and pick some invoices, and then we'd go hand pick the invoices out of the filing cabinet and check the details and make sure that it was right. And now you can just import all of the financial data into your software, tell it to look for all the ones that seem a little out of place, a little too high or a little too low or maybe repeated, and identify all of the risks and then tell you, just go look at these ones. And you don't develop that keen eye of sensing when something is off because the computer just did it for you, and then all you had to do was tick, tick, tick. And quite frankly, nowadays, the invoices are probably all uploaded too, so you just don't have to do that work. And that was huge amounts of hours for juniors. So again, going to the lack of opportunities for juniors, but a lot of those basic skills that you need to first have before you can build on those skills, we're not getting the opportunity to learn those basic skills anymore because we've programmed a computer to do it for us.
I always thought it might be onerous work, but they're learning to understand what to look for as irregularities, so it becomes like a second nature when you're senior. But if automation is doing all that for you, you're not learning to be critical in your thinking or observational skills.
Another example is we used to do on-site field work for every audit. We'd get into their offices, we'd sit down in meetings with their managers and their leaders and talk to them about what's going on. Well, that's too cumbersome now. So we send out a checklist or a questionnaire, and we do the work by remoting into their systems. Now, we're not doing the high-profile audits. I'm sure that KPMG is going into General Motors and interviewing and doing that at that higher level of reporting for the markets.
You're allowing the accountants to talk to people still.
Yeah, even though we don't like it, they're still allowing us to do it. Whereas now it's done so much more remotely. So we're not getting that feel of the organization and the workflow. You're not getting an opportunity to overhear a conversation by a disgruntled manager in the back, or the whispers of unhappy staff that give you a sense of, okay, this is the culture of the organization. That means that there's some risk in these areas that I need to poke a little bit more for. So, yeah, that developing that intuition, that gut feeling, so to speak, that helps drive so many business decisions, risks analysis, I fear we're losing that and we're cutting it out of the equation.
How do you profile your new hirees then?
Yeah.
If you're not going for the juniors anymore.
Well, we still do. We do bring on usually a co-op student and hope that that person then stays on with us. We don't bring co-ops on every year. It's needs analysis, but we still do have that role in the office. And we do hire at the more experienced level too when we need someone. So it's all about the role that we're hoping that they'll fill. And in a small organization like ours, a lot of the time we're kind of at the mercy of, you tell us what you're good at and we'll be the ones that adapt around that. I don't have room for 5 managers and each can do their own thing and be good at everything. We need to get somebody who's great at some things, and then we will adapt around that. So it's looking for people with strengths that can fill at least some of our needs and then going from there.
You guys see the same kind of evolution businesses that you audit, where they're changing their hiring profile on juniors and more intermediate and seniors, or do you have any insight into how tools are affecting other businesses?
I'm not so sure about the tools affecting other businesses, but I think it's a significant issue of technology affecting the lower level jobs. And there certainly seems to be a pervasive attitude of, I just want somebody who knows how to do it. I think we're all under time pressure. Somehow, despite all the technology we have and all the luxuries we have and the quality of life we have, we just don't have enough time. And we're working less than ever and somehow busier than ever. Somehow we can order groceries online. We can do almost everything from the comfort of our homes. We can do it painlessly. We can have a doctor's appointment online that takes 15 minutes of our day instead of 3 hours, and we still have no time. We have less time than ever, and I struggle to get my head around that. But anyway, that's a little bit of a digression. So coming back to the lack of time to train juniors, that seems to be a pervasive attitude. I'm willing to pay a little extra to get somebody who just knows how to do it, because somebody who knows how to do it frees up my time. I don't have to train. I don't have to review a file and then go over it with them and then fix the mistakes and then fix them again. And yeah, it's short-sighted, but that's a pervasive theme of, I just need it done as efficiently as possible in the short term.
Well, we see the same thing, and I know others around us too. It's, to your point, we want people that can do the work and get it done. And it seems like there's less tolerance, less patience for mentorship in some ways, especially of the junior round.
And I don't know if some of it's just general demographics. Like, I found myself guilty sometimes of, if a junior makes a mistake, I think to myself, we've talked about this before. I've gone over this 100 times.
Oh, so we're the grumpy old people now. Chris.
And it's like, no, I didn't actually tell you 100 times. I told the 100 juniors before you 100 times. So no, you shouldn't know yet. I just feel like I'm done talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe you look at the population demographic charts, and I think more of us that are making those decisions and more in management roles, we've now been doing it long enough that we're tired of teaching the juniors over again. And so
maybe that's it. We're aging ourselves out of tolerance. And it's up to those slightly younger, 10 years younger than us, to be doing the mentoring at this stage.
I used to love the mentoring. I used to love sitting down with a junior, explaining how it worked, fostering their education. Not just, hey, you did this wrong, but here's why we do it right. Here's the bigger picture and how it affects everything. I used to love it.
Yeah.
And I just don't have the time. So what I'm trying to do at work is now, you know what? I just shouldn't be the one reviewing the file. I need to get somebody who's a little younger, who's a little newer in their career, who's enjoying that part of the process so that they can feed that enthusiasm to the juniors. I'm trying to take myself out of that because I'm not doing a good job of it.
Well, sometimes we need to recognize where we've run out of tolerance.
Yeah.
If there was one thing you could tell the new crop, the juniors, or ask them to focus on or think about, what would that be?
The main message that I give to our new juniors, I just try to remind them that you're going to make 1,000 mistakes. And once you think you're figuring it out, you're going to get a bigger, more complicated file, and you're going to feel like a junior again. And I try to remind them that process continues for 3, 4, maybe 5 years, where you just always feel like you have those ups and downs in your confidence of whether you can do it, whether you have accomplished success in terms of your knowledge development. So I just try and remind people that not to be discouraged by that is part of the process, and that when you have that next frustration of feeling like you've got a file back and it's got 100 things you need to change, that's okay. And to not be expecting to be great at something just because you've done well in school your whole life and you did well in university in your whole life and you even did the CPA program successfully. There's still so much to learn and to enjoy that.
Do you still apply that thinking to yourself now?
I would say I'm almost on pause with that right now. Every once in a while, when I've got a little bit of time, I find myself excited about the prospect of adding some letters to my name. Not because I want letters, but because I would like the experience and knowledge that getting those letters provided. So whether that's specialized or developing more specialty in things like trusts and estates or complex corporate reorganizations. But I'm at a place in my life currently where I'm trying to focus on other things that are taking up a significant amount of my time, my energy. And so although I have that little flame in me, I don't have the capacity right now to flame it without sacrificing something else. And those other things I'm not willing to sacrifice right now.
Is that a wood stove reference you have there?
Those themes run deep in my life. No, I think that there will come a time where that happens. Right now, when my kids come home, if I'm home, they're very excited to see me and they're happy to spend time with me and they really want to. And that'll change. At some point, they're going to be more independent. They're going to not only not need me, but not want me for a while. My big hope is that once they're 20, they'll come back again.
Yeah, I think it's the cycle.
I expect so. And so I'm prepared for that. But when I have that capacity, then I hope to foster that. And I hope to develop more specialties in that knowledge area. But right now, I just don't have the capacity in my life to take on a big education project.
It sounds like the concept of what success means has also changed over time.
Certainly. But I think we all have a desire for change sometimes. A little digression. I've got cousins that are a lot younger than me. And I remember one of them's an artist. And last year, she was trying to decide what was next for her life. And she had a scholarship opportunity for an art institute in New York and one in Denmark. Or she was going to move to a Gulf island and homestead and live off the grid. And I remember that stage in life where in a month, your whole life could be different. Yeah. And the excitement and adrenaline that came from that. I could not imagine 3 more different scenarios than a year in Denmark, a year in New York City, and setting a life up on a Gulf island on a plot of land without electricity. And so just the synapses that start firing with all those opportunities and thinking how they could all unfold and all the opportunities that exposes. And I'm at the opposite stage of my life. I'm at the stage of life where if dinner is an hour late, it disrupts my rhythm, and sets a chain of consequences in effect that I can't handle. So I love that, and I'm sure that day will come again where my career, maybe it's semi-retirement or full retirement, and the world will be my oyster again. But that's to keep my mental and physical health where it needs to be and to keep my family relationships and friend relationships where I want. I don't have the capacity for wild change right now.
You have to be that stable
at this
for
time,
your kids, for sure.
Yeah. At this time, it's about stability and maintaining the things that need to be maintained. And going back to the shortage of time discussion, it takes a lot of focus and discipline on those things to maintain them because of the pressures that want to take up your time and your energy and your capacity. So, yeah.
Okay, one last question on your career journey.
Yeah.
You touched on what you'd tell younger accountants these days. If there was one specific thing you'd tell young Chris Mills at the outset of all this.
I can't say that it would be something that would affect where I necessarily am today, but I think I was slow to adopt that work-life balance approach. And when I first started out in accounting, I was working long hours and I was studying long hours and I pushed myself incredibly hard. And even before I started in the firm, like when I came back from all my travels, I was ready to work. I took a full-time job and a 7-course workload, trying to... I didn't really feel like I was trying to make up for lost time, but I was trying to make sure I didn't fall further behind. And I was trying to get my prerequisites to get into the program, wanted to live on my own. I just took on way too much and pushed myself. And I was in my early 20s when I first gave myself shingles from just pushing myself way too much. I was not there for family and events they were going through. I was regularly saying, I'm sorry, I'm too busy, I've got to work, I've got to study. The friend romantic relationships certainly suffered at that time. So if I was going to tell myself something, it would be to go back to that point in my life and remind myself or tell myself, hey, you don't have to push that hard. Take some time and figure out what you have to do to take that pressure off, whatever it is. Find a way to enjoy your life and stop trying to live it in a way that once you achieve X, Y, and Z, then you can relax or then you can start enjoying it. Took me too long to learn that.
Would you have listened to yourself?
I might have been too stressed to have been able to absorb that advice at that time. Because people did tell me. When the doctor said that I had shingles, immediately he chastised me for working too hard. My parents regularly said, you're going too hard, be careful. They didn't tell me to stop, but they warned me. And I didn't listen to any of it.
Yeah, funny that. You knew everything, didn't you?
I was I knew everything I knew, which must be everything.
How did we know so much before, and now we know so little?
The more I learn I didn't know.
Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about where you came from, your upbringing, your work, some business and career, albeit important and critical for all of us. The other piece that is also equally or even more important is our relationships. Relationships we have in our personal lives, our work lives. Life sometimes brings about some challenges. Earlier in your life, you had some relationship challenges, married and you separated. What were some tools or strategies you had that you developed to deal with that more difficult time of your life?
Well, I think, when you're going through tough times and parts of your life are not going the way, they're not as successful as you want. And I think that applies whether what's going wrong is career or personal or something. I think for me, the main strategy for coping with that is trying to keep the other balls in the air, so to speak. So, for example, just because the relationship is not going well, do what I can to keep the other areas of my life together. Try to keep my other relationships with friends and family still functioning and healthy and positive, continuing to still try to focus on work and developing my career. My first marriage was at a time that was very early in my career, and it was still very important to continue that growth and hard work, and I probably responded in an unhealthy way of putting too much focus onto work at that time, and that I'm sure contributed to the problems that we were having at that time. And at the same time, I think it is important to keep other areas of your life going well. At that time, I did not have some of the other parts of a healthy life active. I was not pursuing enough personal interests at that time and personal health, but I do remember at one point realizing that I had a lack of personal interests and hobbies and outlets for myself. And I can remember sitting in the office spare bedroom and just thinking, what can I do about that? What do I even like to do? And I had to, I'm too logical of a person at times, but I just went through the list of things like, would I like archery? Should I read more? I know I'm not good at art, but what about sports? And oh yeah, I loved hockey as a kid. I haven't played hockey. I wonder if I could play hockey. And so I started Googling like hockey in Victoria, and eventually came upon a competitive ball hockey league that operated out of Langford, just outside of Victoria, and thinking, okay, let's find out. I sent an email and I put myself on a free agent list, and eventually somebody gave me a call and they asked me to come out. And so I bought a hockey stick and I went to a local school and just banged a ball against the side of a school for a while just to get the feel of a hockey stick again, and started playing and enjoyed it. And I was terrible. I was a good hockey player as a little kid, but it had been a lot of years, and I was terrible and I was out of shape. I was winded.
The question is, would you have beat that 6-year-old hockey player that you were playing?
I would have beat him up, but he'd have been better than me. And so I stuck with it, and it was twice a week. And eventually our team ended up making the provincial championships. And we were in the D division, but we still went to the provincials. And I wasn't a key part of that team. I was the third line defenseman, but we came second. in the provincials, and we got a medal. And I still have that medal, and I'm incredibly proud of that medal because to me, it doesn't represent second place at the provincials. To me, it represents my efforts to improve my life and to see something through and to try and do something better and try and focus on what makes me happy and then grow that and see it through and develop. So I'm incredibly proud of it, even though it's second place, D division, ball hockey, and I was third line. But that's how I tried to cope, was trying to find other things in my life, outlets, balance. And I didn't do a great job of it, but that was one of the examples of success I had in that area.
People get so locked into what they're losing in the relationship that having something to bring in and to work on and to play with is so important.
Yeah, for your sense of identity. If you're all about one thing and that thing doesn't work out, then who are you anymore? I think it's important to have a lot of fires on the go. And then when one goes out, you've still got a lot of other parts of your life that still give you meaning, give you happiness, give you purpose.
That reminds me, actually, I was listening to a podcast with a gentleman who, the name escapes me, but they were talking about how you need to also have mourning periods for the things in your life that no longer fit. And the context they were talking about was physical activities. So the person used to downhill ski but was unable to anymore because of their knees. So they had a time of mourning to accept that that's no longer them, their identity, and let go of that identity. And then they moved on to to cross-country skiing. Now, granted, that's a small leap, but they were advocating just that awareness of when you need to let go of something, that it's okay, especially as we age.
I think professional athletes is an example of that in an extreme where to become a professional athlete, you have to sacrifice and work and work and work and get to the top of your craft. And then if you're lucky, at the age of 30, someone tells you they don't want you anymore. And now you're just really good at beer league, whatever sport you're playing. And maybe you can get into coaching. There are opportunities, but I think a lot of them go through that mourning process of having to move on because they don't want to move on, but they're being forced to move on. And it can be a knee injury or age or any number of things that force it. And yeah, you have to deal with it. You can't ignore it. I think a mourning period is healthy. But yeah, you got to find a way to transition it to something else, because if you don't, in my opinion, I can see from my life, if I don't have a purpose, a drive, that begins the downward spiral. And so while it's fun to dream of retirement at a young age, I think the first immediate question is that really what I want? How would I find that purpose? Is it through personal pursuits and hobbies? Would that be enough? Is it volunteering for an organization and trying to really make a difference? I think you have to have something.
Yeah, we're creatures of work, really, and identity and purpose. And that grounds us to the world, really. Without that focus, you start to get more and more out there, unfocused and a little airy.
Yeah, and some people manage to do it. I've been on vacation in tropical places, and you always see those one or two people that have a tan that looks like it's been there for 5 years. They're at the beach every single day, and they even seem happy. And I'd like to talk to that person and ask them how, but I don't think I could do it in a non-condescending way that would come across as, how could you possibly be happy with this nothingness that you're living in? But the real question is, how could you, how do you find... And maybe their answer would satisfy me, and maybe it wouldn't. Maybe they're just a different person. Maybe they've tapped into something wonderful that I need to achieve. I don't know that answer because I'm too afraid to ask them.
Well, maybe it's community and finding time to have random connections or meaningful connections, building their whole life around it.
Yep. Maybe every afternoon after the sun goes down, they have a potluck dinner with 30 of their best friends and go change the world. I don't know what they're actually doing, but...
Going back to the separation that you filled your life with sport and other activities, how did community or friends or family play into supporting you through that?
Yeah, for sure. It's not something that I tried to talk about very much for the most part, because I think what's challenging when you're in a relationship that you're wanting to work it's hard to talk negatively about that relationship and all the bad things because you feel like you start putting it out there and start maybe making it self-manifest. If you say, oh, this isn't working, this is bad, I'm unhappy. I felt the fear that I'm starting down the road of the end. So in a lot of ways, I felt the need to put forward a front of that it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Now, I'm also very aware that I am a terrible actor, and even if I don't talk about it, it's on my face. So I don't think I actually tricked anybody. I just tried not to ask people about it. But when things were really tough, or incidents would happen or something, certainly friends and family were always there and without a question. I can remember times where late at night, I'd just drive to my parents' house and stay there the night. I didn't even tell them I was coming. I just showed up. And it was a given that it was okay. And they would always be there for me. And at that time, not a lot of our current friend group was around Victoria, but Joe was. And anytime I'd call Joe and say, hey, bud, I'd love to grab a meal, he's always there. And that helps both for the moment of trying to talk about something and resolve it, but also just to feel grounded, feel connected, and feel like that part of your life is successful. So it's both the conscious and the unconscious support.
Yeah, there's an important piece there about you can find a partner, you can lose yourself in the partner, but also never forget that there's other people around you, and to have those people around you. It's more than just you and your wife or you and your husband. There's friendships that are key to your mental and emotional health. I couldn't have got to where I am without your support or Joe's support or all my friends through different difficulties in my life.
Yeah, and we shouldn't need to. There is so much value in the shared experience and the ability to share experiences and knowledge and helpful advice and a different perspective. And going back to some of the earlier comments about failing to ask, when I have a problem, my tendency is to pull out a pro-con list and scratch it out and ruminate and debate and struggle. And so many times, if I'd just been smart enough to just say, what would you do? Or what's your take on it? I would have come to the forefront and got out of my little headspace and learned something valuable and probably saved myself a lot of heartache. So it's just so important to have that support and that friendship.
Yeah, I wonder, this is me not knowing what's going on for young people today. We talked about COVID, the impact on people. I wonder how that looks for younger people, how they cultivate those friendships, if it's any meaningfully different than when we did it or not.
And I don't know if this is just old man perceptions of the new world, but it seems radically different. I didn't play a lot of video games as a kid, but when I did, it was when friends would come over and we'd be in the basement and we'd be playing a sports game or a racing game or whatever, but we were all in the room together.
Yeah.
And today you hear about video games as people being connected with their headphones and they're in the rooms by themselves. And it's hard to know, is one better or the other? I think human connection is really important. There is human connection. There is a certain level of human connection of online gaming and community and having those people, but there's not that same intimacy of somebody being in the same room and being able to joke after the game is over or talk about it. It's a different experience. And so I fear that it's a much more isolated experience. It's that catch-22 of we've never been more connected than through all the social media apps that there are, instant messaging, instant text messaging. In many ways, we have so many more interactions with each other, but they're all with digitization in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but I don't know if there's any way of coming back from it. It seems to be just more and more and more down that path. And that scares me a bit for my kids. I start hearing things these days about people going back to the flip phone, or I feel like the new generation is much more focused on experiences. You see a lot less materialism in goods that they want to buy and much more about, hey, I want to do these things, I want to travel. So I'm encouraged by that. And I hope along with that comes the closer connection at the human level.
Yeah, it must be a worry for your kids too, I'd imagine, in some sense.
It will be. I've currently shelved that as a future dad problem,
okay,
as
future
opposed
Chris.
to yeah,
yeah,
that's a
all
future Chris problem. My kids don't have Facebook and messages and all of that stuff. They're not on their phones till late. I know that battle is going to come one day, and I don't look forward to it, but it's just not today's battle. So,
Yeah, fair enough. Pulling back to the divorce, and then you touched on what structures you had to get you through it. How was reintegrating, and this is asking for other divorcees, how was reintegrating back into the dating life?
So my experience was rather seamless. I was quite fortunate. Once the separation had happened, I took some time to settle myself and be alone with myself for a number of months. I think it was pretty close to a year before I decided, you know what, I'm ready. And a couple of times over that year, I would put in a fake profile on a dating site just to see who it would match me up with and who was out there, but I never pursued anything. And just when I was starting to think, okay, I'd like to be with somebody, I want to share my life with somebody, I got a call from a friend who said, hey, I know somebody through work, and she's fairly similar position. She ended a long-term relationship a little while ago, and I know you both, and I think you guys would hit it off. So do you want to come over to my place for a dinner? And I just, sure, let's do it. And tried to put aside all my awkward insecurities about blind date, first date, meeting somebody new, and just kind of said, okay, let's do it. And what was nice about it, as opposed to the cold meeting somebody and taking an interest and trying to get their attention, is that there wasn't pressure to make something work, but we both knew why we were there. We were both there to meet somebody. And so, funny side story, but so we're at the dinner and we go to watch a movie, all four of us together, the other couple and us, and it's like movie theater style, big seats, big couches, and there's like 3 seats, and it was like, well, I can either give this person space and sit so awkwardly apart, or I can just go for it. And so I just said, hey, mind if I crowd your space? And she said, not at all. Okay. So I sat down and just started chatting, and then we hit it off. And we talked for a lot and made plans to see each other again the next week. And I just kind of did my best to let my guard down and just go for it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but just try and do it.
Oh, man, that's great. That's a great story. I never heard that before.
Yeah. And we hit it off immediately. Our first date, we had coffee, we had a walk, we had lunch, we watched a movie. It wasn't planned to be that. We just kept saying, hey, do you want to do the next thing? And we were hooked very quickly.
Yeah.
And we were engaged. Unofficially, I would say we were engaged about 3 months later, and officially we were engaged like 6 months after we met. And the rest is history, so they say. But so I could say, I didn't have the experience of the online dating or trying to meet lots of people or new relationships and heartbreaks and starting over again. I got very lucky that the person, I hit it off with her because we had so many interests and common goals and like-mindedness and approached things the same way. And so we had similarities. We enjoyed each other's company, and just very lucky that the person that ticked enough boxes ticked all the boxes. I think it's very tempting to stick with a relationship that ticks some of your boxes, and it's always that question of, is it enough? I hope I'm not speaking for her when I say we both feel the same, that, it's she tells me that she feels the same when I say these things to her, so I hope she means it. I think she does.
I think she does.
So yeah, that's my story of how I transitioned from one to the next and how we got to be where we are now.
Was there a change in perspective in how you viewed relationships generally from earlier to now, or to then?
I would say that the two main things, number one, in my first relationship, the two of us often said that we balance each other out, which was another way of acknowledging that we were very, very different people. And I think that opposites or balancing out, I think that there's a lot of space for that in a relationship. I think the challenge is, at least in our situation, was that we were so different that I think we both rejected the other side ultimately. If somebody is an uber extrovert and somebody is an uber introvert, and you try to put those people together, they might balance each other out for a little bit of time, but eventually the introvert says, I just can't handle this level of socializing, and the extrovert says, I just can't be at home another night a quiet time. And so I think where it can balance each other out, I think it can also promote the extremism in the other side. And that's what ultimately happened for us.
Yeah.
So the first main thing about changing the approach was trying to focus more on somebody with similarities, similar interests, things we can do and share for each other, rather than feeling like you're with somebody who fixes your weaknesses or ignores your weaknesses. So that's one. The other big one for me was that having gone through a massive failure and seeing all the steps that led to it, I'm now hyper vigilant of avoiding resentment in a relationship. And so whereas in my first relationship, I didn't want to talk about things, let's just move on, let's just forget about this. Now, if I detect even the hint of disdain in a comment or anger or something, I just immediately, are you upset with me? And I'm not trying to be like super needy, afraid, like, but just wait a minute, like, are you okay? Are you having a bad day? Did I do something? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is, nope, not mad at you. I didn't mean it that way, or sorry, I'm just cranky about something else. But I feel almost a compulsion or obsession to try and resolve conflict as soon as it might be there, because I fear that if it's not addressed, then it will grow.
Yeah.
And I don't want that seed there. I don't want it to grow. I so value and love the relationship and can't see anything but continuing it. And so I need to ward off any possible intrusion that could threaten that.
That's a healthy way to be, is to embrace that conflict full on without fear.
Well, and we're close enough that we can do that. We're close enough that if she does say, hey, I'm actually pretty upset that you totally ignored this thing, chances are I'm first going to be resentful and take it personally and feel guilty. And it's going to take me about half an hour before I realize that I need to get my head out of my ass and realize that I did screw up. But I'm confident enough that I can make a mistake and work on it, as opposed to fearing that if something's gone wrong, that's the beginning of the end immediately. It's not the short game that I'm worried about. I'm not on eggshells worried that we're close to the end. Far, far from it. I'm thinking long down the road, and I want that long road to be there, and will do anything I can to preserve it.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for sharing that. It's always beautiful to hear the true love and desire to make something work with their partner. I haven't heard it put so eloquently by a friend in a long time. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks.
I really mean that. It's quite admirable, the love and care that you have for your partner, also your family, your friends. I think, and I know there's a lot of respect for you from your friends, and we always admire Chris. So we're all very grateful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure it goes without saying, but that's how I feel. I feel incredibly lucky to have such good people in my life. You can be a good person and not have the fortune to have that type of support and friendship community in your life. It doesn't always happen that way.
It's both a desire to have the right people around you, but also an intolerance for the people that need to be moved out from around you. You and I have both gone through that with people we've known in our lives.
Yep, I think sometimes you just have to move on from a friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, there's just a few questions I'm asking everybody.
Okay.
So, where can people reach you through?
Well, the easiest, I guess, way to, if somebody was trying to find me and had no idea how to get to me, would be through our company website. Our firm's name is Wiseman and Mills, and we have a website. And there's a contact form. So if someone was trying to cold call me, that's probably where they might start.
It's wisemanandmills.ca.
.ca. Yep. That's
Perfect.
right.
What can they reach out and ask you about?
Well, they're welcome to reach out and ask me about anything. I don't purport to be an expert on very much. I mean, even in my field of accounting, I meet a lot of people who know a lot more than I do. So I'm always happy to share an opinion and a thought. I would caution against anybody thinking it's the right answer or the right thought, but I'm happy to give it anyway.
Okay, fair enough. And then, is there anyone you'd like to connect with?
I'm not sure I know how to answer that. I guess it depends on the topic that it might be about. Like I said, I've enjoyed hearing perspectives of people that have different points of view. If somebody, for example, heard a comment I made about how I think I should impart knowledge or a sense of security onto my kids, and somebody said, "Hey, that's great, but guess what? This is also a really great idea. I'd love to hear that."
Okay.
And it's a challenge these days with so much information out there. I mean, you try and Google how to raise a kid. Good luck.
Leave that to the experts.
Just because we have kids doesn't make us experts, man. Even the experts, I'm not sure, are experts. So, yeah, I just love hearing from people that have interesting ideas, interesting thoughts about what this world might bring or how to bring happiness into your own life as we all navigate it.
Great. And then 2 more things. One, there's a question left from the previous interviewee. The gentleman's name is Dave Petco. He's an artist, tattoo artist based out of Whistler, and owns the tattoo parlor Black Ohm Studios. So there's the plug. The question was if there's any band or musician, living or dead, that you can bring back and them have a personal concert just for you, who would that be?
Whew, that's a very interesting question. I think the first thought would be Chris Cornell. I loved listening to Soundgarden when I was a kid, and I'm not musically inclined. I tend to, when I listen to music, a lot of the time I listen to what I listened to as a kid, because that's my main emotional connection to music, is going through those challenging developmental years where everything feels intense. And I loved listening to Soundgarden. So to take me back to that place where music really impacted me and just affected my soul, that's Soundgarden.
Soundgarden.
And certainly some other bands. So I think that would probably be... Yeah, that's where I would start. That's where I go to first.
Chris Cornell had such a powerful voice. And I remember when those albums came out.
Yeah.
First hearing Black Hole Sun. Oof.
Yeah.
Powerful time.
Yeah. It's still something I can put on and do the dishes and listen to, and it's just, it just hits me.
Okay. Thanks. So we'll share that with Dave.
Yep.
And then in the spirit of interacting with the future guest, if you could ask a question to the next mystery guest, not knowing anything about them, only that they're someone that's gone through life experiences just like the rest of us. Professional, personal challenges, whatever it is. What would that question be?
I would like to know whether it's a book or whether it's a podcast or a documentary, whatever resource it is. I would like to know what they've read, watched, listened to that was powerful enough that made them rethink something major in their life. Whether that's a belief system that they had, whether it's politics or finance or culture, just something where they read it and they put it or listened to it or whatever, and when it was done, it was so powerful that they just had to sit and reflect and reevaluate whatever it is they used to think or how this fits in or changes what they think about that topic. I'd love to know that.
That's a great question. And that plays into the spirit of keeping those opposing or life-altering points of view around.
Yep.
So, cool. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I look forward to the answer.
Yeah. I think we all do. All right, let's give one of these, buddy.
On camera. Thank you very much. This is it's been a lot of fun.